Anyway, I'm enjoying it
enough
greatly.
for this episode.
Wow. Wow.
Oh yeah, I need the link for the notes.
Oh, yes. Yes.
It is in the Google Drive. Do you not have the Google Drive?
Hey, I'll just put it here in the chat. Shazam, sucker. There you go.
I have the best wardrobe ever.
That is a suit you have on, sir. Oh, look at that. Stuart just snuck in without anyone noticing. How are you, Stuart?
Let's see how many minutes before he leaves.
Hey, Stuart Robbins is in here.
Yeah.
He's our special guest for the day.
Oh, he is.
Well, if no one's affiliated you with Satan before, I guess today's your day. Oh my goodness. All right. This intro you have for Stuart, I'm gonna have to do that twice. I bet I'm gonna fumble the fuck out of that.
That's okay, John. We don't expect anything less.
Thank you.
And remember, repeat after me. I don't English.
All right. Well, shall we all get our recording rolling?
Oh, recording.
Blue leader standing by.
Red leader standing by.
Brown leader standing by.
Red
Brown note standing by.
Red button standing by.
Did anyone?
Simply red standing by.
Is Stuart recording?
That's a good question. Stuart, how do you usually record when you do your podcast?
Are you actually there?
Oh, it may have frozen.
It looks like he's frozen. Maybe? I don't know. I can't tell if he's just sitting very still or if he's frozen. I think he's frozen.
He's a simulation, isn't he? That's what it actually is.
There is no such Stuart. He's a
We're on to you, Google.
Well, this is awkward.
I guess we'll wait until we can get him back in.
Awkward silences are awkward.
I haven't looked recently.
Live.
Yeah, we're on.
Somebody might be watching this and...
No, we have 0 viewers currently.
Okay.
Apologies, future viewers. We are waiting for our dear friend Stuart to join us again. He seems to be lost in digital land.
I, however, do not apologize. If you're unhappy with it, you got what you paid for, fucker.
Eloquent.
As an avowed Satanist, I enjoy eating worms.
Is that a soggy French fry?
My preferred
no, it
food
was
is
actually a worm.
bats.
Gotcha.
The soul of an infant will occasionally suffice.
That's a snack.
Oh, we have comments. Whoa, on the website. Let's see what comments we have here.
Stuart's back. Yay.
I was running a massive render job on my laptop, and it just froze up everything, so I had to quit it.
Oh. Alrighty. We want to
Massive render job. Is that a euphemism?
No.
Didn't.
Oh!
Welcome to our show. This is about as tactful as we get.
I apologize in advance for the dick jokes. There's bound to be at least one.
I don't.
Usually before the 3-minute mark.
So we just wanted to make sure you're all set up to record. We don't know how you usually do that, but is he? Oh, no, he's not frozen again. He's just very still.
Now he's just messing with you. My God, this is enormous.
That's what she said.
Phrasing.
I just loved the
I don't think that's phrasing. I think that's just intentionally.
All right.
Alrighty. Ken?
So, Stuart, do you have a way to record your feed for this?
Maybe. Depends on if I've installed it or not yet.
Okay.
That's okay. I'll do a little dance for our viewers.
Take it off, McElroy.
Do we have any viewers, that is?
I don't know.
Well, eventually, I guess. I haven't looked at our download numbers recently.
Pretty good. I'll say that.
Are they? What the hell's wrong with you people?
Decent.
I mean, thank you, but also, what the hell's wrong with you people?
Why are you listening to us when you could be listening to insert name of worthwhile podcast here?
Or Radio KMLA.
What?
So, speaking of what, I was looking at this what. Ken Ham and Pat Robertson? What? Get the fuck out.
Yes.
Like, you serious? Wow. Just wow to that.
I see that.
Yes, I have a way to record.
Huzzah. Okay.
Ken Ham accused Pat Robertson of heresy. Oh my god, I love it.
It's a beautiful thing.
I love it.
So yes.
All right. Let me get my recording started, and you can sync us up. Good, sir. I think we're sans brandy today.
Okay. Do we have some gin or some rum at least?
Ching.
Wow.
Hey-o.
Such joke.
Alrighty. So if you're not recording, begin recording now.
I am recording.
Good to go. Alrighty. To sync us up on the count of 3, I want everybody to say Satan! 1, 2, 3.
Satan!
Hello, and welcome to the Irreverent Skeptics podcast. I'm your host, John Omby, and joining me today in the unending fight against the forces of darkness are Erno.
What? Am I here?
You are. Michael McElroy.
Hi.
Mike Bowler.
Rock on.
Dumbass.
Hey, I'll make a deal for your soul.
Oh, yeah? Well,
Too late.
we'll talk about that later. And our special guest today, the astronomer royal of Carl Mamers, the Conspiracy Skeptic podcast, and the brains and brawn of the Exposing Pseudo-Astronomy podcast, Stuart Robbins.
Hi.
Welcome to the show, Stuart.
Thanks.
So before we get started talking about great evil, tell us a little bit about your podcast and what you do, sir.
My podcast, as you said, is called Exposing Pseudo-Astronomy. I expose pseudo-astronomy. That's about it.
Is it on the tin?
Say that again?
Truth in advertising.
That's what it says on the
Yes.
tin. Yeah.
Yes. Bad astronomy was taken, so that's why I went with pseudo-astronomy. Phil Plait has sort of marketed his concept, so I went with my own. I address topics of crazy astronomy, some geology, some physics, some basic science in the podcast, but it all I try to really make sure that it's mostly astronomy type stuff.
Excellent.
Very cool.
So would you say that you're better than an engineer?
I'm different.
I was going to ask if you've... never mind. That's a bad joke. I'm not going to make it.
It's okay, John.
Let's just move on.
We know your jokes are bad.
Yeah, I know. It's part of the show. So today we're going to talk about the Satanic Panic. It's that period during the 70s, 80s, and 90s when the devil was always lurking just around the corner. The religious right were to be believed, and if not them, who can you trust? Diabolical influences were everywhere in pop culture, from music and movies to games and toys. So where did it all start? What were some of the wildest claims? Is it still going on today? Let's dip our toes in the lake of fire, pinch our noses, keep out the smell of burning brimstone, and take a journey through hell to find out the truth.
Bum, bum, bum.
Ta-dum. So let's talk about the beginning and some of the allegations in the Satanic Panic. And yeah, as I learned doing a little research about this, this was a worldwide phenomena. It wasn't when I growing up, I only knew about what was going on here in the U.S., but
Same here.
yeah, this was very much widespread. So I've got a list of a few different occurrences around the world, and then we're going to talk about some here in the U.S. So 1987, Broxtowe, UK. Children were removed from their families in Nottingham and were subsequently charged. Families were subsequently charged with multi-generational child sexual abuse and neglect. A 600-page report on this incident concluded there was no evidence of satanic ritual abuse. Yeah, pay attention to that part. You're going to hear that a lot.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. 1989, Uda Pekala, the Netherlands. I bungled that all up, I'm sure. I have no idea how to pronounce that. A conservative magazine published allegations by a group of parents who claimed that their children had witnessed satanic ritual abuse over a period of about 17 months in 1987 and 88. In 1990, in South Africa, Gert van Rooyen and his accomplice were accused of murdering several young girls. Ultimately, they committed suicide while they were on the run from the police. And later, the son of the accused was accused of murdering a Zimbabwean girl in 1991, and he claimed that his father's victims were involved in international child pornography rings, slavery, and Satanism rituals. And surprise, surprise, no evidence was ever found to substantiate the claims.
Wow.
Yeah.
In 1990, I'm going to screw this up, Rochdale, UK, 20 children were removed from their homes by social services who alleged the existence of satanic ritual abuse after discovering satanic indicators, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean.
It's like a litmus test for if something's satanic, they dip it in.
And it turns sulfurous.
Smurf dolls and an Iron Maiden album.
That is satanic.
Go ahead and you do a couple more of those. Hit them up.
I'm hurrying on food.
Oh, I got you. Okay, then I will. 1990 to 91, Orkney, UK. 9 children suspected of being sexually abused by their families and an alleged child abuse ring were removed by social services. The parents approached the media, and the case was made national and international news, which I don't remember any of that.
Yeah.
In April of 91, a sheriff ruled that the evidence was seriously flawed and the children were returned home.
Wait, you mean there was another instance where there was absolutely no evidence of what was being accused?
Apparently there's been 1 or 2 of those over the years.
Yeah, so in 1991 in Perth, Australia, Scott Gosington, a self-professed Satanist, was linked to organized child sex abuse. His lawyer claimed that there are 13 satanic covens existing in the area that held bizarre orgies involving children, and that Gosington had been followed and threatened by coven members throughout the court proceedings after his arrest. But I don't know if there's actually any evidence of that. In 1998, in Emilia-Romagna, Italy, 6 adults were arrested and charged with prostituting their own children and the production of child pornography, and they were reported to have been involved in satanic rituals. So it's not enough that they're actually doing some terrible stuff. They just have to throw in the satanic stuff on top of it. In 1999, New South Wales, Australia, 2 journalists from the Sun Herald claimed to have seen evidence of ritual abuse of children. In interviews with 6 mothers of the children who had disclosed these experiences... Wait, what? Claimed to have seen evidence of ritual abuse of children. In interviews with 6 mothers... There's not a finish of this sentence here. In interviews with 6 mothers of children who had disclosed experiences... Yeah. Anyway, the stories were corroborating, although they had never met one another, and the children were able to draw representations of satanic ritual sites, similar to sites uncovered by police on the coast of Australia, I guess.
Also, 2001, Melbourne, Australia. Diocese of the Catholic Church acknowledged allegations that a Melbourne priest took part in satanic ritual abuse in which a number of deaths occurred in the 60s as, quote, substantially true, and paid compensation to a surviving victim. The impression I got there was rather than argue about whether or not there was satanic ritual abuse, it sounded like, okay, something happened, so it's substantially true, here's some money, go away. That's what I got out of that. 2002, Pescara, Italy. 4 people were arrested for, quote, Satanism and pedophilia Reportedly, the group may have abused dozens of children in rituals involving stolen corpses from ceremonies. I'm guessing those were funerals. It was oddly worded what I read, so I'm guessing the ceremonies were funerals that they had stolen the corpses from. And in 2003, Lewis, Scotland, 3 children's allegations resulted in the arrest of 8 people for sexual abuse occurring between 1990 and 2000. A 2005 investigation by the Social Work Inspection Agency found extensive evidence of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse and neglect. Police investigation resulted in allegations of an island-wide satanic pedophile ring, though charges were dropped 9 months later following an inconclusive investigation.
In 2007, in Dublin, Ireland, a jury at Dublin County Coroner's Court, that's a lot of C's, ruled that an infant found stabbed to death over 3 decades ago was the daughter of Cynthia Owen, who claimed a rather extensive story of ritual satanic sexual abuse involving her family, including her older brother, father, and mother, who were all offending parties in the abuse of her and her other siblings. Apparently this has a much longer and more detailed story that was kind of interesting to read, but we still got to move on. 2007 in I'm just going to pronounce this the way I think it's pronounced because I don't do Italian. Rignano, Flaminio, Italy. 6 people were arrested for sexually abusing 15 children and filming the children engaged in sexual acts with satanic overtones. Wow.
So I actually found something in the Nordic countries, even though I didn't find any satanic panic things from Finland, but I found one from Sweden. After there was a case in the US where there were several pedophiles in children's daycare, the Swedish police started to investigate some claims that in Sweden there would have been satanistic cults that used that were pedophilic, and they killed these children that they abused. After that, they killed them. But the police searched for missing children and graves from the forests where these things allegedly happened, and they found neither graves nor missing children. So it was a complete bust.
Surprise, surprise. Shock and awe, yeah. So actually, this stuff is apparently still going on in terms of people accusing crimes of being satanic in origin. Back in February of this year, a 15-year-old girl was murdered in Houston in what the Daily Mail says appeared to be a satanic ritual killing, found with an upside-down cross carved into her stomach and religious items placed in a circle around her partially naked body. She was abducted and raped and bashed in the head with the lid of a toilet tank and an ashtray until she died. And there was a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old who were classmates of her that were arrested for the crime.
So before we move on to the ones here in the U.S., I just want to note that like the single common thread through all of these, all the satanic ritual abuse seems to be sexual abuse. And so I was discussing the other day with Brandy about that, and I was like, I wonder if that comes from this need to find some kind of reason for a terrible thing happening, and being able to ascribe that to like, oh well, there's this evil demonic force that drives people to do this thing, which I don't know that there were any cases where that was used to try and excuse someone, but I guess that helps for some people square in your head how someone can do something so awful to children. I don't know. That's
not to mention that it makes it easier to say it was them, not something like me. So it's an outside force that makes people behave badly, not something that is human.
Right. We had a lot of famous cases here in the U.S., though, that made it big in the newspaper. There was a series of child abuse cases in Kern County, California, back in the 1980s, at daycare facilities. They involved claims of a pedophile sex ring that performed satanic ritual abuse, with as many as 60 children testifying that they'd been abused. And at least 36 people were convicted. Most of them spent years in prison. 34 of those 36 convictions were overturned on appeal. The district attorney who was responsible for them was Ed Jagels, who was sued by at least one of the people whose conviction was overturned and who remained in office until 2009. So this guy was there for a while. The other two convicts who didn't get cleared died in prison and were unable to clear their names. Another big case is the McMartin preschool trial. This one got a lot of coverage. This was a major one. So, there's a very thorough Wikipedia article about this. I'm going to skim through a lot of the stuff that I gleaned from it, but I would suggest that if you're really interested in learning about this, read the article. It goes into great detail. Basically, there's a preschool in California operated by members of the McMartin family, and the members of the family who worked at the school were charged with numerous acts of sexual abuse of the children they were watching. The trial over this lasted for 6 years, and there were no convictions, and it was the most expensive and longest criminal trial in American history. Basically, the mother of one of the students complained to the police that her son had been sexually abused by her estranged husband and by one of the teachers at the school. She believed this. She started believing this because her son had painful bowel movements, and apparently that was enough to say that he had been sodomized by the teachers. She also made several more accusations, including that people at the daycare center had sexual relationships, I wouldn't call it a relationship, sexual encounters with animals, that the administrator of the school had drilled a child under their arms, and that the Ray Bucky, who was...
Did you say drilled?
Drilled, yes.
The power drill?
And that Ray Bucky, one of the teachers at the school, had flown through the air unassisted. He was questioned, but not prosecuted due to the lack of any kind of evidence. They also alleged that in addition to the children having been sexually abused, they saw witches flying around, they traveled in a hot air balloon, they were taken through underground tunnels. One of the children was shown a series of photographs by the teacher's lawyer, and identified Chuck Norris as one of the abusers. There were claims of orgies going on at car washes and airports, of children being flushed down toilets into secret rooms where they were abused before they were cleaned up and given back to their parents. The children talked about playing a game called Naked Movie Star, which the prosecution tried to say was them being photographed while nude. But in fact, during the trial, testimony from one of the children showed that, in fact, it was just a game with a rhyming game where you'd say something like, "What you say is what you are, you're a naked movie star." And that was the entirety of the game. What really sticks out in people's minds about this is the changes that happened to the way people interview children for criminal trials because of this case. The children who were interviewed by this group called Children's Institute International, which is an abuse therapy clinic run by a woman named Kee McFarlane. The techniques that they used during the investigations were really suggestive and sort of invited the children to make up events and to act as if they were talking about things that had actually happened. And by the spring of 1984, about a year after this all started, they claimed that 360 children had been abused. But this questioning style that they use, the really suggestive leading questions, is part of what sparked the whole false memory syndrome idea, that there's people who are coming up with memories for the children of things that didn't actually happen, and then this stuff is being presented at trial as if it was actual memories of what was going on with the children. Ultimately, only 41 of the original 360 children testified during the grand jury and pre-trial hearings, and fewer than a dozen testified during the trial itself. A British clinical psychologist and professor of psychiatry who reviewed the videotapes of the interviews as an expert witness during the trial regarding how children are interviewed, and he said that the techniques that they used were improper, coercive, directive, problematic, and adult-directed in a way that forced the children to follow a rigid script, and that many of the kids' statements in the interviews were generated by the examiner. Transcripts and recordings of the interviews contained far more speech from adults than from children, and showed that despite the highly coercive interviewing techniques used, the children started out being kind of resistant to the questions, and the video recordings of these interviews were pretty instrumental in the jury refusing to convict anybody, because it was obvious just by watching how much they were coercing the children into saying things that they kind of wanted to get them to say. There's a lot of weird stuff in the media and in the trial that went on. The woman who made the initial allegations about her child being sexually abused, of course, she said that Ray Bucky, the teacher, could fly. The prosecution throughout the trial asserted that this woman's mental illness was caused by the events of the trial, but as it turns out, she admitted to them before the trial that she had been diagnosed with some sort of mental illness, and evidence of this had been withheld from the defense for 3 years. When it was provided, finally they sanitized all the reports and excluded any of her statements at the order of the prosecution. So even once they finally admitted, yes, we knew she was mentally ill, they still tried to clean up everything to make her seem more rational. One of the original prosecutors ended up leaving the case and said that the other prosecutors withheld a bunch of evidence from the defense, including information that the boy who was supposedly abused by Ray Buckey didn't identify Ray Buckey in a police lineup. They also accused the district attorney on the case, deputy district attorney, the guy who left, the prosecutor who left, also accused the deputy district attorney on the case of lying and withholding evidence from the court and from defense lawyers in order to keep people in jail and prevent access to exonerating evidence. So there was a lot of shenanigans going on here. There was also a guy who shared a cell with one of the accused and said that he had gotten a confession from the accused while sharing the cell with him. This guy ended up trying to flee the country and confess to perjury and a whole bunch of other criminal cases where he had manufactured testimony in exchange for favorable treatment by the prosecution. So the people that they were calling as eyewitness or as witnesses were directly falsifying information to support the prosecution. And he actually admitted to fabricating the confession when he had been given immunity. And the media coverage for this case was really skewed towards just uncritically accepting everything the prosecutors said, and there were conflicts of interest involved with this between like the prosecutor, the social worker who had organized all the interviews with the children, and members of the media. For example, I think there was one of the editors of the Los Angeles Times was involved in a romantic relationship with people involved in the case. And there was actually somebody who worked for the Los Angeles Times who wrote a several article expose on the coverage that his own paper had given to the trial, and he won the Pulitzer Prize for discussing how flawed it was.
And let me guess, it ended up very well for the accused. They never had anything to do with the case ever again after it was closed, right?
Well, the trial, it lasted for 7 years, cost $15 million. Nobody was ever convicted. It was the longest and most expensive criminal case in the history of the U.S. court system, and nobody was convicted. The preschool ended up being closed because of all the controversy that had surrounded it as a result of being just torn to shreds and defamed in the papers.
And they weren't guilty.
Right, nobody was guilty. It was absolutely all fabricated, entirely fabricated during the interviews with based on it. It started with the accusation from the woman who was mentally ill and tried to accuse, I guess, her estranged husband of abusing the son, and the estranged husband worked for the school. And as a result, the police sent out a form letter to a whole bunch of parents who went to the school saying that there were accusations of child abuse and all these different things like that had been accused, and asked them to talk to their children, and they all came forward and brought up these stories, which ended up getting blown up into all these bizarre claims during the interviewing process. So no, nobody ever actually was abused. Nobody ever was guilty of any of this sort of weird stuff that was going on. And obviously the one guy wasn't actually able to fly.
No shit.
Actually, one of the children who was involved in this came forward in 2005 retracting all of the allegations of abuse, saying, "Never did anyone do anything to me, and I never saw them doing anything. I said a lot of things that didn't happen. I lied. Anytime I would give them an answer that they didn't like, they would ask again and encourage me to give them the answer they were looking for. I felt uncomfortable and a little ashamed that I was being dishonest, but at the same time, being the type of person I was, whatever my parents wanted me to do, I would do." Yeah, so the parents didn't give up, though. The parents of all these kids, I mean, after the case ended, they like back in 1990, they hired an archaeologist to investigate the site of the school to look for these supposed underground tunnels and rooms. And one guy claimed that he'd found evidence of the tunnels consistent with the accounts that had by using ground penetrating radar. But in other people's research, they said that the concrete slab under the school was undisturbed except for a little patch where the sewer line had been tapped into. They removed the concrete slab, and there was no sign of any material whatsoever that could line or hold up tunnels beneath it. The concrete floor would have made it impossible to fill in the tunnels once the investigation started. And basically, there was evidence that it was like a little rubbish heap, basically, back in the 60s, that there had been stuff stored under there, like the old mailbox of the owner of the property was found on there, and tin cans and stuff like that. But there was never any evidence of actual tunnels underneath the buildings.
So let me get this straight. They lost their reputation, their business, all because of these rubbish claims.
Absolutely. Yep. And there's been a couple of good outcomes as a result of this. The way that children are interviewed for criminal trials has been just greatly changed. Even at the time of the trial, they were outside of the existing guidelines in California for investigating cases that involved children and child witnesses. But now that there were a whole lot of cases that followed afterwards where people demonstrated that interviewers were being coercive with children because of reviews of the videotape. It kind of became a standard trial technique to show the videotape of the recording of the interview. And it got to the point where prosecutors started demanding that they not record the interviews, which is kind of shady if you think about it, but oh well.
All right, so we got just a few more of these, and I'm going to gloss over them pretty quickly because I can't stand much more talking about ritual child abuse, and we have plenty of other things to cover anyway. So the next one's the West Memphis 3. This is a fairly famous case where these three 8-year-old boys, Stephen Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers, they were reported missing in May of 1993 in West Memphis, Arkansas. A day later, their bodies were discovered in a drainage ditch, and they'd been stripped naked, hogtied, and killed in a knife attack. And subsequently, through investigations, three kids, 16-year-old Jason Baldwin, 17-year-old Damian Eccles, and 18-year-old
17-year-old Jesse Miskelly.
Yeah, sorry. Let me. And 17-year-old Jesse Miskelly Jr. They were all arrested and eventually tried for these murders. So some of the points about this were there had been rumors that one of the accused had an interest in the occult, and that was what led the investigators down the whole route of maybe this was a satanic ritual where these kids were murdered. The investigation was full of a lot of really shady interrogation techniques, like sleep deprivation, coercion, intimidation.
Jeez.
Yeah, there was a lot of polygraph evidence that was used in the investigation, in which we all know that's super reliable. And if you don't know how super reliable that is, take a little time to look into it because it's fucking ridiculous.
I suggest the bullshit episode from Penn and Teller about the polygraphs, where they show you how to use the polygraph by clenching your ass muscles.
Well, not just that. Also, I think that episode is the one that I watched where they showed how a polygraph investigation, like how that's used. It's not, it's not admissible in court, and the way that's used is. So I ask you a question, and then later or ask you a series of questions later, I say, well, when I ask you about whatever, you had some kind of reaction, so tell me about that. What else do you have to tell me?
It's like a mind game. You're trying to get people to confess stuff.
So what else about this? I guess so. In the end, there was one kid who had claimed to have witnessed the murders, and that it was near what he called the playhouse, which was an area where these kids were known to play, and also near where the bodies were discovered. He had claimed that he had seen Satanists who spoke Spanish performing the murders, but the rest of his statements were just wildly incongruent with everything else he had said and everything he would say going forward. One of the people who made a statement, a lady who made a statement about this, had said that one of the accused had claimed openly in a Wiccan ceremony that they attended that he had committed these murders. He was bragging about it, and then later she recanted her statement saying that She had only made the statements because she was facing charges of theft against her employer. She had allegedly stolen money from her employer, and that the police had offered to drop those charges. And also, she was hoping to get a reward for having found the murderers. So as it turns out, two of the three were given. One was given a 40-year prison sentence, one a life sentence, and the other was sentenced to the death penalty. After many, many years, the verdicts were finally overturned, sort of, in that they were allowed to put in Alfred pleas, which the gist of that is, with an Alfred plea, you can maintain your innocence, but admit that prosecutors have enough evidence to convict you in court of something. So they were released after, I think, 18 years. After all this happened, they were released. So that's the short version of that. There's a couple of documentaries about this, and also I think there's a This American Life episode about a year ago where they talked about this, if I remember correctly. I'll put links to those in the notes of this. So the next one's a Little Rascals Daycare Center. This is another example of the same thing, like the Kern County incidents or the McMartin trials. This happened in North Carolina in 1989. It involved a total of 90 children. I'm not going to go through all this because it's really similar to what you'd already talked about in much more detail over the McMartin trial. And then another is the Oak Hill Satanic Ritual Abuse trial in Oak Hill, Austin, Texas. And this is yet another of the daycare Satanic Ritual Abuse scares that went on in this time.
This one actually kind of upsets me.
They all kind of upset me.
More so than the others, because in this case, these people were convicted and
Yes.
were in prison until late 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez, and I thought that
What-
the
what's the same
Nazis
with that?
inventing the daycare were bad.
Yeah, the West Memphis Three, they were convicted, and there were convictions in the Little Rascal Daycare Center case as well. Like,
Yeah.
these bother me quite a bit. You know, I haven't even been able to make poor jokes about anything
And it
for
looks-
over a half hour, and that's unusual. So.
It looks like in each of these cases there was prosecutorial misconduct, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, this is my opinion is that not just that, but also really shitty investigative work.
Right.
Not to
There's-
mention that the accused will forever be known as the people who were at least accused of doing something this horrible.
Right.
Wow.
So outside of those particular cases, let's get slightly more lighthearted, I suppose, and talk about some of the common claims in the Satanic Panic.
Sure. Yeah, so there was actually much more to this whole Satanic Panic thing than all these sex abuse cases, although that was a common claim. The website Rational Wiki lists a few things that evangelicals and the law enforcement officials they had suckered in about this stuff believed about these networks of Satanists. Apparently there tended to be multiple generations of devil worshippers in each family. There are teenagers who were enticed to join satanic cults. Human sacrifice is apparently a common feature of these things.
Because nobody would notice people missing.
Yeah, and apparently when pets disappeared, that was because they were being used for animal sacrifice.
I thought the disappearing pets were like chameleons that just hid really, really well, and the kids didn't.
Or
Nothing.
the hamsters going under the sofa.
Insert laugh track here.
But ching.
Apparently, Satanist networks are part of the broader Illuminati conspiracy.
Of course they are.
Mike
What
Buller,
is
tell us
not-
all about that. You have to know about that, sir.
A little bit, yeah. No, it's
According
the
to Alex.
Illuminati is that's like a catchphrase for just about anything.
For
Whatever you want to pin to. So
The evil, ominous them is the
Yeah.
Illuminati.
Well, Kevin
Yeah,
Trudeau's natural cures they don't want you to know. They is the Illuminati.
yeah, big garter snake. I mean, that's all part of the Illuminati.
So apparently Wiccans and other neo-pagans are actually satanic. Surprise. Wiccan symbols such as the pentagram are signs of satanic activity, and some Christian books on Satanism and the materials that they gave to law enforcement about this stuff included the peace symbol and the anarchy symbol as on their list of satanic symbols to watch out for. And apparently there are pentagrams in the American and European Union flags.
They are called stars.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
So some parts of pop culture obviously are really recruiting tools for Satan, including heavy metal music and the game Dungeons and Dragons.
How did I know?
Darkness.
I listened to that and I played that game and I never realized. Like, oh my goodness, I was being recruited the whole time.
Casting magic missile.
Yeah, because
I
a
keep a-
bunch of nerds throwing dice around the table and telling interesting stories. That's what Satanism's face is.
But Arno, you only think you're throwing dice. What you're actually doing is casting scrying bones to summon forth the dark spirits.
Well, of course.
I will say this: as a teenager, could I have obtained dice for playing D&D that were carved from bones? I would have thought that was the coolest fucking thing ever.
Yes. So some towns, agencies, and even major corporations like Procter & Gamble are secretly under the control of Satanists, apparently.
Well, of course they are.
And the Illuminati.
Yes.
And Big Garter Snake.
By association.
It all ties together, people.
NASA, they're all controlled by Satanists.
Big global warming. Yeah. Satanists have infiltrated the military, of course. Washington, D.C. is infested with
There are no Satanists in foxholes.
Oh, God.
Atheists.
And apparently, speaking of atheists, apparently atheists are really Satanists, which is, according to Alex Jones, I guess, that's his big thing. He's all about how atheists are really Satanists. In fact, there's
Anyone would know.
There's a quote from him. Let me pull it up here. Live broadcast.
So I'll insert a joke here while you're looking for something. Yeah, wouldn't it be cool if you had soldiers with satanic spells, black magic going around? If they could fly, that would be pretty good.
It would give you the leg up in a fight, I would imagine.
Yeah, that would be a useful skill.
So
I was going to say there was a Monty Python bit with the police having magic wands and doing rituals to catch criminals. You know, that'd be so cool.
Or just have a squad of LARPers just to throw at the enemy. Just
Lightning bolt. Lightning bolt.
You keep it. They have a little bag of tennis balls on their waist. Magic missile. Magic missile. Throwing.
So yeah, apparently, as for atheists really being Satanists, the quote from Alex Jones, who is certain that there are still baby-eating Illuminati masterminds plotting the downfall of Christianity in America, said that this is their religion. See, you'll find at the highest level, the atheists really aren't atheists at the higher levels. These people write books. They worship Lucifer, and they do. They love death, and I'm just in love with life. And I'm sorry for those who have never experienced it, and they laugh at us, all these unhappy atheists and psychologists and psychiatrists out there talking about how horrible their lives are and their incredible rates of suicide.
So two things. First of all, could you do that again and sound more angry? And second, he's right. I do.
I'm Alex Jones, and I know nothing.
You didn't use the word sheeple in any of that. I'm surprised.
Or make it
Like Palpatine put it, unlimited power.
Oh my. So,
Sounded more like Gargamel. Just saying.
Those stupid Smurfs!
No, okay. Apparently Halloween is also a satanic holiday, and in fact there were some evangelical Christians in recent years who tried to make Halloween their own by calling it Jesusween and using it to spread gospel messages and tracts door to door from their website.
They tried to make the coolest holiday there is with the women in slutty clothes. They wanted to make it lame as shit.
Exactly, yes.
That reminds me of that Texas town who changed their official... The official greeting was no longer hello, but heaven-o.
This is an actual thing that happened. Yeah, I love it. But anyway, the Jesusween people have a website where they're trying to get people to join this movement. And they say, every year the world and its system have a day set aside, October 31st, to celebrate ungodly images and evil characters, while Christians all over the world participate, hide, or just stay quiet on a Halloween day. Being a day that is widely accessible to solicit and knock on doors, God inspired us to encourage Christians to use this day as an opportunity to spread the gospel. The days of hiding are over, and we choose to take a stand for Jesus. Evil prevails when good people do nothing. Jesusween is expected to become the most effective Christian outreach day ever, and that is why we also call it World Evangelism Day.
Wait. Don't they have like hell houses on during Halloween?
Oh yeah. Definitely.
Indeed, they do.
Although that's not Satan related.
If I recall correctly, this last Halloween I was apparently a lazy atheist slash Satanist. I think I just sat at home chatting with my girlfriend on Skype and playing Skyrim on my Xbox. So I was.
Skyrim is the devil.
Well, I'm sure it is. But it was very passive.
Just look at all those horned helmets.
Yeah, it was very passive. That's all I'm saying. I didn't do much. I didn't go out and put the message for it. I didn't evangelize for the God I didn't realize I believed in by not believing in the other God. So.
Wow.
We don't celebrate Halloween over
Get
here.
my shit straight. So let's talk about good old Geraldo.
Yes. Geraldo.
I got a question of everyone here. Who actually ever saw the Geraldo exposing Satanism? Like,
I've seen Geraldo exposing his cool, flexible muscles. Man, that guy is trimmed.
I saw him open Al Capone's vault, which was
Absolutely nothing!
yes. That guy, I don't know what his relevance is anymore.
he's a correspondent for Fox News now, isn't he? Is that right?
I think so. He kind of floats around. I think he's kind of like one of those that kind of he's spinning around the drain of the toilet, career toilet, and every might catch
How's the
on the
feeling?
But yes, so Geraldo Rivera had an hour and a half long special called Devil Worship, Exposing Satan's Underground, which I've summarized here as abominable schlock pseudo-journalism all about how Satanism and heavy metal were leading to murder, child abuse, and animal and human sacrifice. The key takeaways from this wonderful video, the general theme is that Satanism is to blame for what people do and not the people themselves. They clearly didn't think to vet anybody who they brought onto this show. They actually brought on a kid who was the youngest person ever on death row and was convicted of multiple murderers. But he wasn't alone. They actually interviewed him with a guy who was a self-proclaimed expert on Satanism. And according to a review of this guy's book on Amazon, this book informs that satanic murders are hidden from the public, digging deeper in than other books comma splice, damn it. This book informs that satanic murders are hidden from the public. Digging deeper in other books, they tell you the elite are doing this. So I've come to the conclusion, your children get kidnapped by the elite for ritual. The police know and are told by their higher-ups not to tell the public.
I said this image when you said that about the youngest person ever on death row. It was like some 4.5-year-old kid that's all like, "I'll fuck your shit up."
I think he was like 15. But no, he killed his parents and then a convenience store clerk, I think. But according to Geraldo, heavy metal and drugs lead to Satanism, and the Weekly World News and conspiracy theorists are legitimate sources. They had a guy on there named Ted Gunderson who kind of became a famous name. Mike looks like he recognizes the name.
I know the name, yeah.
Ted Gunderson was kind of a go-to guy for conspiracy theorists because he was very, very gullible and believed everything he read. And he was a former FBI agent or FBI division chief or something like that, bureau chief. And so he lent an air of legitimacy to basically any conspiracy that could pay him enough to talk for them. So they had him on the show, on Geraldo's show, and he alleged that Satanists had a network of very active people with a rest and relaxation farm, whatever that is. They had loose ties to the drug trade and motorcycle gangs, and they were experts in surveillance, photography, and assassination. Just as an example of the sort of attitudes that Gunderson has for other stuff, he believes that the CIA and FBI are behind most terrorist attacks, and that he had proof of the chemtrail conspiracy, and that the world was going to descend into darkness and chaos on Y2K.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess he's been on Coast to Coast and Alex Jones' show numerous times.
I wouldn't be surprised. I have seen him used as support for the UFO conspiracies also.
He's been on Alex Jones a few times. I think Alex Jones uses him as his source. So
yeah, he died a couple years ago too. So yeah. Let's see what else. He talked to therapists and parents who were involved in the McMartin preschool scandal, and the spokesperson for the parents said that 1/3 of the children in Manhattan were victims of satanic molestation.
1/3.
1/3.
How many molesters would that take, even if they did like full time?
Mr. Owl, how many molesters? No, I'm not going to go there. I never got
good with math.
3. He played an interview between himself and Charles Manson, where Manson just started talking all sorts of gibberish about how he's God, and then Geraldo breaks in and says, "Or Satan," and Manson just kind of runs with it. And Geraldo keeps pushing this "you think you're Satan" thing over and over again, and Manson starts ranting about Satan and demons and stuff. And then in the voiceover, Geraldo says that Manson was satanic.
So basically, he fed a crazy person an idea.
And the crazy person ran with it, and then he said that it was the crazy person's idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty bad for a journalist to do.
So the great thing about this video is the first person to say anything that actually makes any sense whatsoever is Danish heavy metal artist and avowed Satanist King Diamond. He said, "How much can you influence kids? I think people are too clever to be influenced by watching a band or listening to an album to go out and do these things. Because if they were that easy to influence, watching the news, you get the real thing, and everybody knows that, right into your living room." But Geraldo then goes on to say that the lyrics from King Diamond's music, which talk about death, the grave, and evil, are actually him preaching Satanism.
Well, there was a guy in Finland in 1998 who pretty much killed a 23-year-old with 3 of his buddies. They listened to black metal and ate the corpse. So
Tasty.
Was the motive of that? Was that supposedly because they listened to metal, or just that or was it just that they had done that coincidentally?
I think the guy was batshit crazy, and somehow he convinced his 3 friends to come along. Yeah, they didn't eat the whole body, and that's how the police got them. They found the leg from garbage dump.
Oh, nice.
Well, as we all know, ankles make for really poor eating anyway.
Very bony.
You make soup from that. You throw it into a pot and let it boil up a little bit.
Yeah.
Make some stock with it.
Yes.
You got to roast them first.
Manhawk.
Yeah, but the band they listened to just to get them some infamy was a band called something like Ancient. Yeah.
It would have been great if it was Cannibal Corpse. That would be just perfect. No. So there was another one of Geraldo's guests was this guy, kind of kooky-looking guy dressed like Dracula, from the Temple of Set, which is a satanic church in like Los Angeles or something. And he actually came across as one of the only other slightly rational people on the show. Let's see. He said that, "I think there's some confusion tonight because the same term means something different to Satanists than it does to Christians in the United States. By our own standards, the people who you've shown in these film clips would not be Satanists, either present or in the past. Rather, they would be the failures of a conventional religion. Originally, the Church of Satan, when it was founded, was composed not of people with a hatred for Christianity, but of people who, by and large, were agnostics and atheists because they felt that the institutions which had arisen around Christianity had failed in their moral commitment. So Satanism itself became an emphasis on rational self-interest and on taking responsibility for your own intellectual and ethical decisions." So here we have an actual Satanist saying that Satanism is about taking responsibility for your own actions, and all these other people blaming Satanism for their actions.
That's just what they want you to think.
Well, yeah, but he's a Satanist, so for him, good is evil and evil is good. This is what one of the people actually said. So, but there are also some people who blamed cattle mutilations on satanic rituals. You might hear about these in the context of UFO cases and alien abduction, whatever, where the eyes, the ears, tails, internal organs had been removed. And when it came to the UFO cases, these actually just turned out to be natural cases of scavenging, where an animal dies in the field, scavengers come along and look for easy openings into the body. Eyes and ears are easy to get rid of. The tail is easy to get rid of. And then the internal organs, they usually go up through like either a hole in the belly or through the anus of the animal. And so they said that these things had their organs removed and their blood removed, and that was satanic rituals instead of scavenging.
On that same note, in the West Memphis 3 case, one of the 3 boys that were killed, there was some genital mutilation, and at first that was thought to be evidence of some ritual, but as it turns out, it was most likely animals feeding on the bodies. So,
well, surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
The claims weren't true. What do you know?
You mean there isn't any Satan worship going on here? Oh. So I think out of everything I've researched for this episode, my favorite thing to watch was these 2 nitwits Gary Greenwald, and Phil Phillips in the video called Deception of a Generation.
Let me guess, they are some kind of Christians.
Oh, yes, very much so. Phil Phillips was a guy who wrote a book called Turmoil in the Toy Box, all about how toys were hiding occultism and introducing children to witchcraft and Satanism and all this stuff.
Let me guess, He-Man.
Well, that's on the list, yeah. Gary Greenwald, on the other hand, was this guy who hosted a show called The Eagle's Nest on, I think it was just cable access show or something, and he would send out VHS tapes and cassette tapes of all his talks to people. And he had a series of things where he talked about Dungeons and Dragons, he talked about rock music, and then he talked about toys. And in this video, apparently Greenwald really made a name for himself during the 80s as part of the Satanic Panic through all of his videos, and he made a career interpreting occult and satanic symbolism basically in everything he saw. Phil Phillips started investigating by his explanation here. He started investigating the toy industry because he walked into a toy store while on a 14-day fast he had been directed to go on by God, and he saw occult symbols in the toys there. So basically he starved himself crazy for 14 days and then started obsessing over things that he saw.
Can't these distinguish between reality and fantasy, like movies and toys and such, that are clearly like just toys and movies?
Yeah,
They're not supposed to be educational material.
you'd think that they'd be able to tell the difference, but they seem to have trouble with it.
So I wonder if some of my favorite toys were satanic things like Legos, chemistry sets, microscope, telescope, books.
Legos definitely are, because they have ghosts and vampires and zombies these days.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't back then, but I guess back in the day I could have imagined that they were. So.
There's that guy from Poland just like last month or the month before who said that Legos were satanic. Yeah.
Really?
And it was all because they had all the monster stuff, like Stuart said, yeah.
So be honest, John, did you have a rock polishing kit when you were young?
Is that a euphemism?
I did not, but
I did.
I'm trying to think. I had access to one through someone in my family had one. I never had a rock polishing kit.
So you like to polish your rocks and kind of get stuff off your rocks, or get your rocks off of stuff, I guess?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't, right?
Terrible joke. Oh my god, I need to stop talking.
Nice joke, John.
Thank you, John.
That was my caliber right there.
So, the best stuff from this video, the reason I really love this video is some of the quotes that I got from these guys. For example, Phil Phillips, I'll start with him. One quote, "There's a vast movement toward the occult within the cartoon and toy industry. Most people don't realize it. 80% of all cartoons deal directly with the occult, and 40% of the toys in the market have occultic influence."
Well, if you think about it, witches and wizards have been popular since the Middle Ages or something. So, in stories at least. So, it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of cartoons had a wizard of some sort.
Right. Let's see. He also said, "He-Man is being lifted up as a god, and many children are receiving him as such. He heard a story about a woman whose young son was in the car with her in the back seat while there was a radio preacher talking about our Lord God, the Master of the Universe. And her boy jumped up from the back seat of the car and said, 'Mommy, God isn't Master of the Universe, He-Man is.'" Apparently there was a boy who was playing with He-Man toys, running around in circles in the church parking lot saying, "He-Man has more power than Jesus! He-Man has more power than Jesus!"
When I was a kid, my mom would take a safety pin to attach a towel, like, drape it around my neck and attach it with a safety pin so I could pretend I was Superman and jump off of furniture.
Huh.
I don't know how exactly that ties in, but I just felt like sharing that.
Satanism.
And I thought Deepak and Ray Comfort were the masters of the universe. What do you know?
Masters of the Igniverse. Let's see, what else? "We have a good versus evil battle here, but the good is empowered by satanic power." And he said, "Actually, these cartoons are making real what Satan has had for a long time." So right there, making real. Cartoons are making something real. What? Apparently he thinks that talking to the dead is called necromology, not necromancy. Regarding Star Wars, the Force is a word used by witches down through the centuries to describe the power they receive from Satan. He says that Darth Vader apparently looks almost exactly like Odin, and that as for Obi-Wan Kenobi, there's a form of witchcraft called Obi witchcraft where they just chant Obi, Obi, Obi over and over again.
Sounds really effective.
Yoda he says Yoda was called the Zen Master. and that he's always
I have
with
seen the
serpents
movie
around him.
several times, and I don't think he's called the Zen Master, though he is called Master Yoda.
And they keep saying that they say that he's always seen with serpents around him, and that Zen Buddhism says there's one force in the world and it can be either used for good or evil. I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, what?
Yeah. Well, there were snakes in the movie where Yoda was in the first time, because they were in the swamps of Dagobah. And I think there were a lot of snakes, but...
Hey, you know how many of all the Buddhists I've met? You know how many evil satanic Buddhists I've met?
One.
Not a one.
Oh, come on. You just have to
Single
know
one?
one.
Apparently, E.T. was a camouflaged occult movie which included levitation, psychic healing, mind control, mental telepathy, and more. And there were inferences to homosexuality. They didn't say where.
And
they just said
He-Man
where.
didn't have inferences to homosexuality.
Buff, hairless, oiled-down men in loincloths. fighting
Blonde male who is ripped like no other.
About E.T., Phil Phillips said, I think one of the things they tried to do in this movie was make people accept that there's more Christs than just one, and that maybe Jesus was an alien.
What?
Yeah. And he said, I was listening what was it? They were talking about G.I. Joe, and he said, I was listening to one commentator's talk about the feelings in Russia, and he said that the Russians were more upset about this new trend in America of children wearing fatigues and being more militaristically minded than they were of our nuclear arms.
That sounds legit.
Right. And they brought up the Smurfs. The freaking Smurfs, man. Come on. Apparently Smurfs are depicted as blue with black lips because when you die you turn blue and your lips turn black, and the Smurfs are depictions of dead creatures.
I thought the Smurfs were all about communism and giant orgies, because you have one female and everyone else is male.
Oh, but you see, they actually said that in the Smurfs, there weren't any female Smurfs. Smurfette was actually a male.
True.
They said that Smurfette was a male Smurf, which was magically turned into a female by Papa Smurf, which is completely not at all the truth.
No! Get out!
Gargamel created her. Not to get your mythology right.
They say that Smurfs are blue with black lips.
So wait, hang on. So you're saying that Smurfette was passable? That's what you're saying?
Yes. And that it was all homosexuality.
I see.
When they say that Smurfs have black lips, like they're just referring to the fact that the mouth is drawn.
That they're
the
inked,
outline,
yes.
Yeah.
So apparently, Phil Phillips claims that in one episode, Gargamel makes a pentagram, lights candles at the points of the pentagram, and then dances in it while chanting a magical chant. And a spirit leaves a magic book and enters him to give him the power to levitate and to go fight the Smurfs.
Well, isn't he supposed to be a wizard of some sort? So that would actually make sense, and he's not the one you're supposed to cheer for, because he's the evil guy.
The actual context here is, in this episode, Gargamel is like trying to join a wizard's guild or something, and they all make fun of him because he's a terrible wizard. And so he buys this magical book and starts reading spells out of it, and actually talks to him and tells him how to cast spells. He in reality, he doesn't make a pentagram, he makes a pentagon. He hops around in it on a foot while saying some magical phrase that includes things like whoozy whatsits and 31 flavors as part of the spell, and suddenly he finds himself riding an ostrich.
As a side note, if you're a wizard who has a spell book that tells you how to cast the spells and you still can't do it right, it is time for a career change.
Yep.
That was in a Care Bears movie.
The Care Bears movie? Yeah, the first
Speaking
one.
of Care Bears.
There was a kid who had a magic book that he found that told him how to be a wizard, yeah.
Wow, you just lost the perfect segue, didn't
So
you?
speaking of Care Bears, Phil Phillips said, what I'm seeing in Care Bears is almost like they're setting up their own religion, that children are to tell these Care Bears their problems instead of telling God or their mom and dad, and they're to depend on their Care Bears to take away all their troubles. Yeah, it's pretty fantastic.
So you get to speak to anything that's in your mind if it's a god.
Yes. So the host of this show also has some pretty choice quotes. He says, the witchcraft and occult practices in these shows are not make-believe. They're taken from actual witchcraft, actual pagan religions. Levitation, mind control, astral projection, and other forms of witchcraft ceremonies are portrayed within the cartoons. So he thinks these are actual things. Regarding Dungeons and Dragons, he says, I have letter after letter where people took the pieces. Now there's sixes involved in the pieces of the game, but they take the pieces of the game, they would throw them in the incinerator or the fireplace, and screams would come out because there seemed to be some kind of spiritual forces inhabiting those pieces.
He doesn't know anything about D&D.
There's sixes involving the pieces because they're fucking dice.
The screams were somebody going, do you know how much that fucking costs? You just threw that away.
Those were official limited edition dice. They were collectible.
I don't even know what kind of pieces he's talking about.
That is not exactly an inexpensive hobby if you really delve into it.
No. What were you going to say, Mike?
I was just going to say, it couldn't possibly be the water or any kind of moisture coming out as it melts out and stuff like that, you know.
Or just utter bullshit.
Screaming spirits. Yeah, I'm sure he's gotten letter after letter about this. That actually happened. That's definitely a thing that happened.
Yeah, because no self-respecting role player would ever call a dice a piece.
Pieces.
So there would never be a letter saying there are pieces in a game where there basically are no pieces. God damn it.
So
and apparently that because they involve sixes. There are sixes on them. So, but never mind the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8.
Oh, and there's Monopoly with
Oh, God.
Excited as nope, evil. Let's see, what else? Parcheesi, evil.
Pretzels. If you cut the right beams out of a pretzel, it's going to form a 6.
Dun dun dun, evil pretzels.
I'm gonna go buy soft pretzels this afternoon and test that.
Make sure to throw it into a fire and see if it screams.
Fuck that, I want to eat it.
So apparently, according to the host of this show, a parent who allows his child to watch this on television and also brings these toys into the home or buys them for the child is actually breaking a commandment of God and inviting curses upon the family. And
Jesus said you should not have a level 12 wizard mixed with an evil dwarf in your campaign.
And always make sure you have the right material components for the spells.
Paladins and ghouls do not mix.
Apparently, Rainbow Bright is satanic because the rainbow represents the networking of the new age, whatever that means.
Rainbow Bright?
And it's interesting that she has a little 5-sided star on her cheek, and it's upside down. That's a pentagram again.
But I thought the rainbow represented God's promise not to flood the world again.
Don't use logic, Chris. Come on.
I thought you were for a second. I thought you were talking about a light bright. I was like, how the hell is that evil?
Okay, light brights are evil.
Stupid little peg things.
I loved them when I was a kid.
So on this video, what you see as a repeating theme is that they always talk about the bad guys on the show using occult powers, but they never mention that they're the bad guys. They never mention that Skeletor is the bad guy on He-Man. They never mention that Mumra is the bad guy on Thundercats, which apparently are also satanic because half animal, half human things are supposed to be representations of the ancient Egyptian gods, and a person with wings in He-Man is actually the sun god Ra, and it's so bizarre. There's a point where the guy has a little puppet. It's a toy that's like an action figure that rides on a puppet that looks like an insect and it has motorized wings so you can make it fly. But Phil brings up verses from Revelation about flying beasts with riders on them. And then the host, while he's saying this, just seriously looks like he's about to start cracking up laughing. He can hardly keep a straight face. Either that or he's seriously taking this as something that's true and is just really stupid. I can't tell if these guys are serious or not. I mean, the guy made a career off of this, so I assume he's serious. But they also look like they're about to bust up laughing through this. Apparently, G.I. Joe is a cult because there are characters that use martial arts. And toys for G.I. Joe, which are like toy grenades and gum that looks like shrapnel. I don't remember what that's supposed to be. But he said that those are also occult toys. And something you said earlier, Erno, about how they can't seem to tell the difference between fantasy and reality. They really can't. They can't come to grips with the fact that this stuff is all fantasy. They keep talking about how in Dungeons and Dragons there are white and black witches and wizards pitting good against evil on equal footing. But in reality, God is supremely powerful and evil doesn't stand a chance. But really, these witches and wizards, nobody's saying that this is reality. Nobody is actually saying that this stuff is what you should believe instead of what you're being told by your parents. So I don't know it's like they start off by talking how kids can't separate fantasy from reality, and then they end up demonstrating that they're incapable of viewing fantasy as just fantasy.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I thought.
On the subject of D&D, I think I mentioned this before that I found it interesting how much attention D&D got, Dungeons and Dragons got, as being linked to Satanism. When, as I recall, and it's been many years, but as I recall, the original Palladium role-playing game, which was also a fantasy role-playing game, had far more symbolism, like what would easily be recognized as occult symbolism, although it wasn't that didn't really play into the game, like, oh, you have to say spells or any crap like that. But just like the books themselves had a lot more what I would have considered anyway occult symbols and recognizable things of that nature, whereas D&D was very much just.
But D&D was more popular. They
Yeah,
go
it was,
after
yeah.
the popular things.
Oh,
Well,
You can see it like
it had a
Smurfs
name that was it had a catchier name than Palladium role-playing game. It was terrible marketing for that game, but Dungeons and Dragons has a far more catchy name.
alliteration helps.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely invokes something different than Palladium.
On the subject, oh shit, my microphone fell. On the subject of D&D, they mention how the player's handbook has a list of spells in it, but they act as if this is actually a list of real spells that you can cast, and they tell you how to cast them, instead of just descriptions of what these things do in a game.
Hmm.
Yep.
How do you cast that? You roll a dice to see if it worked or not?
It's not
I got a 21.
it's not like there's even a good description of the spells, how the wizards are supposed to do them, because you're supposed to imagine what a wizard looks like when he's casting a spell. So it's not very descriptive either.
Well, thanks to Peter Jackson, we all know what a wizard looks like now.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Yes.
Or that, yeah.
So I'm actually attempting to pull up the player's handbook for Dungeons and Dragons here, just so we can get an example of what some of these terrible spells are that they're casting.
I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for the past little while, and I'm really disappointed. I haven't learned how to actually cast Fireball yet. They're just not willing to tell me, I guess.
So on the episode when Dumbass drops in here, his eyebrows are singed off and he's missing half his hair, we're like, oh, the spell worked finally.
So that's what Adam Savage was doing when he was missing an eyebrow.
So here we go. Here's one of these spells from the player's handbook. Speak with plants. It's a divination spell. You need to be a level 4 bard, a level 3 druid, or a level 2 ranger, and there's components required. I don't know what they are. The casting time is 1 standard action, which is definitely a real thing in reality. It's 1 minute per level, which is something that's a real thing in reality.
How many
People have
AUs?
levels.
How many standard measurements of action are there in one AU? That's what I want to know.
I mean, what gets me
Several.
is this.
But hey, people should actually have levels for their profession, I'm a level 5 bus driver.
What gets me is this is very clearly not spells for something that's in reality. This is... you would have to be incredibly stupid to think that these are real spells.
What's your point?
Or incredibly dishonest, I guess, is the others.
I don't think these books and things these people say include much logic.
No. Oh, I forgot to mention, He-Man. Another one of the things that makes He-Man evil is that the main character is actually named Adam, which is a reference to the first man. So they're trying to tie in the Bible with Satanism.
Because Adam is such a rare name.
Right.
All right, so before we move on to some more big names, I guess, in the Satanic Panic, one of my favorites. So Stuart, is there anything in pseudo-astronomy that kind of, I guess, it relates to this? Are there is there a good and evil type things, or is this just like bad science? That when you talk about pseudo-astronomy, is it just all bad science, or?
When I talk about it, yeah, but I don't typically touch UFOs, and UFOs. People have very weird ideas about UFOs. Some people say that they're aliens, but the more religiously minded, including someone that I think I've had on my podcast before, say that UFOs are actually the fallen angels, and that it's...
Oh, wow.
There are various versions of it, that they are Satan trying to convince people that aliens actually exist, because aliens, of course, don't exist, because if aliens did exist, then God didn't create Earth as special and that kind of stuff. There's the angels are battling it out in the skies. There's just various religious permutations of UFOs, and I don't really address that stuff. In fact, I very, very rarely get into UFOs at all on my podcast because I don't consider it a single class of phenomenon, and I don't consider it really addressable because it relies so much on one or two or even a couple eyewitness testimony type stuff of I saw something in the sky, I don't know what it is, therefore fill in the blank.
Mhm.
And
Therefore, they are the Spartans that they kick off the big, huge well. This is Sparta.
sure, whatever. So
But if you can't
in
trust
terms of
eyewitnesses,
satanic
who can
stuff,
you trust?
Congress, of course.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually something just recently on, I think, an episode of Cognitive Dissonance or The Scathing Atheist or one of those podcasts where they talked about this radio show where a guy was saying that UFO sightings are actually demonic forces trying to fool your children into not believing in God or whatever. So yeah. I've definitely heard what you've been talking about.
It's kind of stupid to say that UFO sightings are ... because they're probably plurality of phenomenon.
Yeah, well, it's like near-death experience or whatever. It's like there's one thing that you observe, and people for some reason say, well, it can only have one cause. And the analogy, it's a horrible analogy, but it's the one I thought of off the top of my head. The analogy that I use is it's like a pizza. You have a pizza. It is one thing of food, and if you see it, you're going to recognize it usually as a pizza. But there are so many different ways that you can go about making it in terms of you use and the way you prepare it, and do you let your dough rise overnight or do you let it rise an hour, and do you put cheese on it, what kind of stuff, there are so many different ways to contribute to that one class of thing.
Yeah,
And it's the same thing with UFOs.
Is it a satanic pizza? I think.
Depends on how many
you
slices you
pepperoni,
cut.
of course, because it's not kosher.
Oh yes, the demon ham.
Now I want pizza. Pizza.
Stick with us, John. Stick with us.
Okay, just a little bit longer. So let's talk about one of my favorite names, big names in the Satanic Panic. Good old Bob Larson. I don't know how many times I've mentioned that guy. I guess most recently he's been talked about for he's the guy that does the exorcisms via Skype.
That's
So Brandy and I were watching some videos the other day. One of them was after, I want to say it was in Oregon, there was a school shooting in Oregon where Bob Larson was talking about how it was Satan that caused this, and then goes on to explain how, rock music and Dungeons and Dragons and a number of other things are directly responsible for this kind of thing. Expose your kids to these things, and this is what happens.
Not to mention Doom. That's all the rage
I love it.
nowadays.
I love this association game that they play, as if, every time we hear about this, they were listening to Music X or playing Game Y, as if there aren't millions of people doing these things and not committing crimes.
He's another one of those guys that he had a bunch of videos and cassettes that he'd put out explaining how, basically anything was evil that he could think of. And I don't remember very well the content of them, but I remember watching a couple of them and finding them rather hilarious. And I had an acquaintance who just wholeheartedly bought into that, how true all of his claims were, and it was just, it made for some awkward conversations, that's all I'm saying. It was that guy, and I really enjoy it. This is slightly off topic, but I really love watching his exorcism videos. They're all just really, really bad acting, and so obviously bad acting.
And here I thought you were going to say that you really enjoy watching his daughter's exorcisms.
I forgot about that. They do them too, huh? Yeah.
Oh yeah, the teenage, hot, busty, blonde teenage exorcists.
Yeah.
By Brazzers.
Part 4. Yeah, no.
Part 4.
So on the subject of Bob Larson, to get a really in-depth discussion of him and an example of what his exorcism shows are like, I would listen to the Oh No, Ross and Carrie podcast. They actually went and had an exorcism by his little girl followers at one of his shows. It's hilarious.
That sounds really wrong. His little girl followers.
McElroy said it.
Phrasing.
The great thing is that he comes up with, like, this woman who's exorcising comes up with a name for a demon and she says that the demon comes from India, and then he says something about it being from Africa, and then apparently it has been in her family for 14,000 generations, and that's apparently too old, and he tries to get her to say a smaller number, and she says a bigger number, because he believes the world's only 6,000 years old, and so it's just hilarious to listen to.
Hey, little girl, want to lay your hands on me and exorcise my demons?
We knew we'd get there eventually, folks.
Took us a long time. This
feedback at irreverentskeptics.com.
Yeah.
This time it's Dumbass's fault.
Which, by the way, so we have some. On that note, we have a decent number of downloads, so a few people are listening, and I can't believe we haven't offended one single person. I haven't gotten one shitty email yet. No death threats. I swear. I'm let down.
Women are silly.
Not even by insensitive comments on 9/11.
You got to maximize your offensive comments. You got to go for at least 50% of the population.
I thought I had. I guess I'm going to have to work a little harder. I'm just going to be a total shithead for one episode.
It's okay, John. You're too nice for that.
And so is your face. Wait, no. Anyway. All right, well, moving on then. So Mike, tell me a little bit about Jack Chick.
Oh, Jack Chick.
I can't say that name without laughing. God, I love it.
Jack Chick is a marvelous, marvelous human being. I think he's still alive. Nobody really knows what he looks like. He's apparently very secretive about his personal life, but he's a man who for several decades now, probably 40, almost 50 years, has been publishing these little gospel tracts. You might have seen them. They're like about yay big. They're just little multi-page pamphlets with comic strips on them.
In my few years of religion, I had a huge collection of those.
Oh, I love them. I just think they're ridiculously funny. They're all these
unintentional comedy.
They're all these little gospel tracts where they have stories about people, just people's lives or whatever, and they always end up with somebody going to hell or finding Jesus, and they're just goofy, over the top, extreme. Like one of the most famous ones is called Big Daddy. It's about evolution, and a professor starts by telling a student to shut up and stop being so disrespectful for talking about Christianity, and then
hey, was that student's name Albert Einstein?
No, that wasn't. Although it's basically the same story.
He's saying is that he's like every other comic book writer. He just rehashes old shit.
Basically, but in this strip, the student teaches the professor that evolution is false, and then the professor gets kicked out of the university for going and saying he can't teach evolution anymore. So, yeah, this is the sort of thing that he talks about. He also had one about Sodom and Gomorrah, where he shows a bunch of bearded guys with makeup and dresses and earrings and stuff, and it's really ridiculous. But the one that's relevant to our subject of the day is one called Dark Dungeons, in which there's a bunch of people who basically are playing a Dungeons and Dragons style game, and the dungeon master kills off one of the characters, and the girl ends up committing suicide, and another girl gains a level in the game and then gets to learn how to cast real spells, because apparently there's a satanic cult underlying Dungeons and Dragons that when you get high enough in the game, you learn to use real magic. And
they wouldn't claim that if they ever saw Gary Gygax.
Oh. This guy is definitely not using magic. No, so apparently there's a movie version being made that was funded by up to well over 200% of their goal on Kickstarter. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's actually supposed to come out this summer. So it looks hilarious.
I'm sorry, now I'm stuck reading it.
Yeah, I would suggest all of Chick's tracks are available online on chick.com. You can look up all of them. Dark Dungeons.
Turn myself away from this.
He's gotten there are hundreds, if not thousands, of tracts out there now, and he's gotten them translated into a whole bunch of different languages,
such as Finnish.
Some of them are no longer available because they were ridiculously offensive. Like, there was one that was called the Evil Magistrate that had some stereotypical Chinese guy with the rice paddy hat and the big squinty eyes and big teeth, and it's just horribly racist. And he's done the same thing with black people. Like, there was one that he stopped circulating that had black people with all sorts of goofy, exaggerated facial features. And he also had one called Who Were the Protestants or something, talking about how the Catholic Church was taking over and that they were really in line with the Masons and they were satanic. And there's another interesting link here to the Satanic Panic, because there was this guy who claimed to be a former Satanist who escaped from his cult, his coven, whatever, and started informing Jack Chick about all the stuff that was going on in Satanist circles. And it turns out he had never actually been in any sort of satanic church. He just made it all up. But a whole bunch of comics were based on what he had told him, and so a lot of those got pulled from the archives as well. But I managed to find a bunch of them. And if you look for there's a torrent out there called the Jack T. Chick Compendium that contains all of them, all of the tracks, including the ones he's removed, and a bunch of documentaries about Jack Chick and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
I've seen that. I would never download something that is copyrighted, but I might have that torrent downloaded.
I'm not entirely sure if he did copyright them or not, because the people who were making the movie say that he gave them the movie rights for free and didn't want any sort of involvement other than to have them say that it was made by Jack T. Chick originally.
Well, he was distributing them completely for free, so it's like...
Right. I mean, he may still copyright them, but he's distributing them for free, and I didn't get anything that wasn't already on the web. I didn't put anything in this that wasn't already on the web, so...
Yeah, I bet there are a handful of preachers out there, at least in the States, that claim that they were part of a satanic cult or something. Because that will really rile up people. Much like them saying pretty much every single preacher you got out there is saying that I was an atheist at some point.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, I used to watch the Trinity Broadcast Network with my friends, like we were watching comedy shows. There are countless of those. There are countless numbers of those kind of stories. I used to be a Satanist. I used to be an atheist. I used to be any of those things. You name it, they were all there, and they're hilarious.
What gets me?
I bet that channel would make for a good drinking game.
Yeah, there are a lot of folks out there who make a name for themselves by claiming to have been such and such a thing, and that it's the liars for Jesus. There's a lot of them out there, but somehow they think it's okay to lie about this stuff as long as it's in the name of whatever their beliefs are.
So I guess that's about all we have on the Satanic Panic, then, huh?
I suppose that was a lot.
Yeah. How about any final thoughts on Satanic Panic before we talk about our what of the week?
Well, I mean, there's always been this kind of undercurrent of anything evil. I mean, rock and roll has been bandied as being the devil's music.
Oh, the devil.
Yeah. Elvis Presley, he was, his dancing,
Gyrations,
causing all the impure thoughts.
Foosballs of the.
Well, yeah, it's not just a modern thing either. This has been a thing throughout history. I mean, old time. A lot of religions, like hundreds of years ago, would ban dancing among their members because dancing, music, and all that stuff they didn't like.
It inflames the sense of sensuality.
Help us, Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
It's not just a modern phenomenon with rock and roll and all that stuff. This is something that's been going on for a long, long time.
Yeah, jazz music was on the list. These are just things I know all right off the top of my head. Jazz music was the devil's
What about
music.
Charleston?
Kiss. Good old Kiss.
Yeah.
Knights in Satan's service.
Were the Puritans that banned dancing?
I think so.
And the Southern Baptists.
Yeah, there was a funny claim in a Finnish fundamentalist broadcast thing where they claimed that, well, I suppose it is true that people in Kiss concerts shout kiss, 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 kiss. And of course it sounds, when you listen to it backwards, it sounds like
Sick.
sick. Yeah.
So there's that.
And just remember, run it. This symbol here. Okay, this protects you from evil. This gives out evil. So remember that.
Oh, you just reminded me of something they said about Yoda in Star Wars. Apparently, because he has 2 fingers and a thumb, that's the sign that means Satan is Lord.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, hey, we haven't mentioned anything about playing songs backwards and stuff and looking for messages
No.
in that.
Oh, we sure
backmasking.
didn't. Oh, there was a lot of that in the Satanic
Like-
Panic, huh?
Yeah, there sure was. I know that Led Zeppelin got it a lot. There's some.
Yeah, Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah.
They talked about on the Thinking Atheist recently. I don't know about recently, but a few months back, they had an episode on the Satanic Panic, and they were talking about the Christian rock band Petra that did that intentionally to put good messages in their
Yes.
songs if you played them backwards.
Is it called backmasking or something?
Yeah, backmasking.
Yeah.
They were, I guess they were taking back backmasking for Jesus.
So I mean, there were apparently, yeah, like you said, Petra did it. There were apparently a few bands that actually did it. Like the Beatles had, there was some song, Revolution Number 9 or something, where they did some backmasking. But a lot of the times when people found this stuff, it was just a matter of like an audio pareidolia sort of thing. They were finding patterns in the music that sounded like words, and then they were suggesting to other people what these things were, and just kind of mutually reinforcing what they were hearing to each other.
Well, the
Yeah.
Beatles stuff was supposed to be proof of Paul McCartney being dead.
Paul is dead, and yeah.
I'm trying to think. I do remember.
Most successful zombie ever. That's what I'm saying.
I remember. I think Pink Floyd at the end of The Wall. I think they did something backwards, where if they played it, it said, "You found the answer. See Pink in the crazy house," or something along like that lines. I think there was a thing like that. And the only other thing, there was a radio bit here in Chicago back in I think it was in the 80s, where they played, they kept calling it Stairway to Heaven played backwards, but it was the lyrics to Gilligan's Island sung to
That is hilarious.
Stairway to Heavens. It's great.
So
Yeah.
there's a Wikipedia article called List of Backmasked Messages, and there's a very thorough list of a couple, probably about 100 examples here.
Twin Peaks actually used it to great effect on a scene where he's in some kind of a dream state, the main character that is, and I think they spoke everything backwards and then they turned it the right way, so that speech is kind of this weird.
Oh, I heard, the song New York, New York. These guys, they sung it backwards and then played it forwards.
Tool, in
actually-
the Tool. What were we gonna say?
Oh no, that was.
Oh. In the Tool song Intention, there's a period of indecipherable whispering and ambient noise going on about a minute into the song. If you listen to it backward, that point from that on backwards, you hear, "Listen to your mother, your father is right. Work hard, stay in school. Listen to your mother, your father is right. Listen to your mother, your father is right."
That's definitely a satanic message.
Yeah.
Because I mean, stay in school. That's pretty satanic.
You know, the weird thing is that people actually think like this would have some sort of effect, like a backwards message in a song would have any effect at all.
There's a Weird Al Yankovic song called "I Remember Larry." If you listen to it backwards, about a 10-second segment, he says, "Wow, you must have an awful lot of free time on your hands."
Excellent.
Oh, and the Great White Bob and Doug McKenzie album, their first album, they actually do a section backwards, which is, and it's totally nonsense. They just start arguing with each other. It was.
Well, shall we get this shit train rolling towards Woods?
Yes, we should.
What now?
Well, I was going to ask Stuart if he had any final thoughts on all the Satanic Panic.
Not particularly.
All
It's
right.
stupid.
That is
Glad it's not,
pretty much
I'm
sums
glad
it
it's not
up.
a big thing anymore. Although I will say it's entertaining in a watching a train wreck
yeah.
kind of manner.
Watching people get into a moral panic about and it's kind of hilarious.
That it is. All right, so let's talk about what's this first one. Oh my God, this first one is awesome.
It is.
You want me to read this, or do you want to read it?
I'll go ahead and read it. Yeah. Ken Ham challenges Pat Robertson to a debate on young Earth creationism. So apparently on the 700 Club back on May 13th, Pat Robertson ridiculed Ken Ham's young Earth creationism by saying, "The truth is you have to be deaf." Oh, sorry. "The truth is you have to be deaf, dumb, and blind to think that this Earth that we live in only has 6,000 years of existence."
Holy shit, that was good. That was fantastic.
So
But if you're deaf, dumb, and blind, you're
coming up.
supposed to be good at pinball.
yeah. If I guess Ken Ham is good at pinball, as Erno said. Yeah. So on May 14th, Ken Ham accused Pat Robertson of heresy on his blog. He
Whoa! That was
Yes.
we had a throwback
Oh,
to the
no.
80s with the Satanic Panic, and now we have a throwback to the 80s.
So on his blog, he said, Many Christians believe that the world is very old based on fossil records that are I can't do.
Was that a leprechaun?
Sorry.
What was that?
Thank you, Australian. Many Christians believe that the world is very old based on fossil records that are presumably dated at millions of years. Indeed, the dispute between an old Earth and a young Earth is hotly debated within the Christian community. Unfortunately, those who subscribe to old Earth theory do not realize the enormity of their compromise. The compromise is that as soon as one allows for an Earth millions of years old, then once one has accepted death, bloodshed, disease, and suffering before Adam's sin. In other words, the Garden of Eden would have been seated upon a mountain of dead animal bones. This doesn't sound much like paradise. Now, if the world were millions of years old, as suggested by evolutionists, blood was shed and death occurred before Adam's original sin. This would destroy the foundation of the atonement brought by the death of Christ on the cross. According to 1 Corinthians 15:54, sin and death have been swallowed up in victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Thus, the enormity of compromise is revealed. To believe in evolution undermines the entire gospel message of Jesus Christ. All Christians believe that Jesus Christ
swallows.
Yes, Jesus swallowed up the death and sin and everything else that is bad. Like, yeah.
That's what she said.
We just use a little clip of you saying Jesus swallows from now
Jesus swallows.
No.
No. So, all Christians believe that Jesus Christ suffered physical death and shed his blood because death was the penalty for sin. Therefore, teaching millions of years of death, disease, and suffering before Adam sinned is a direct attack on the foundation and messages of the cross. I really don't understand his reasoning here, actually, because even in the book of Genesis, if you read it, God kicks Adam and Eve out of the garden before they'll eat the fruit that would make them immortal, so they were going to die anyway, just naturally. So death was already kind of a thing before the fall anyway. But, best part of the story. On May 15th, Ken Ham challenged Pat Robertson to a debate, either on the 700 Club or at Regent University, which is the school that Robertson founded. He said, I wonder if Pat Robertson would be prepared to discuss these issues with me or one of our AIG scientists. Ha! AIG scientists. Scienticians, yes. On the 700 Club, or maybe in some sort of debate format at Regent University. We are certainly willing to do that. Maybe all of you reading this could challenge CBN Regent University to allow such a discussion, a debate, or forum to occur publicly. I wonder if Pat Robertson, who is allowed to state these things so publicly through CBN, will agree to have his statements publicly challenged and tested.
I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that Pat Robertson just isn't even going to respond to that.
Ken who?
Yeah.
No, actually, the funny part about this is back when Ken Ham and Bill Nye had their debate, Pat Robertson said that Ham was an idiot. So. I think my take on this, though, is basically it's Dumb and Dumber situation going on here. You're not going to have a winner in this debate, just a lesser loser. And I'm thinking that Ken Ham probably burned through all the money that he got from the debate with Bill Nye already, and they need a new influx of cash for his Noah's Ark.
That ark doesn't build itself.
I imagine the debate going exactly like this. Ken Ham, my book says I'm right, so you're wrong. And then Robertson goes, my book says I'm right, so you're wrong. End of debate.
No.
There's historical science.
Yes, huh? No, yes, huh?
Pat, we have a book. Ken, we too have a book.
It's the same effing book.
I love it. It's one of the things that I thought back when we talked about
No.
this.
One of them's using KJV, the other one's using NIV. So.
Ah, yeah, KJV Authentic 1611 edition. Yeah. No, back when we talked about
Jesus
this,
spoke English, you know.
I thought
Copyright
something I'd love to see.
2013.
Something I'd love to see is if we had an evolution scientist like Francis Collins or Ken Miller, who's also a Christian, come on and debate Ken Ham on this, and then he wouldn't be able to say that this is a debate between creationists and atheists.
I wonder if we have any evidence that the world is old and not young.
I have a book that says it is.
What is it called?
Science. Facts, motherfucker.
So here's a what for you. On Monday, May 12th, the Pope the Pope stated that he would be willing to baptize aliens if they came to the Vatican. I'm pretty sure this time I am not. Here, let me give you the link to this. I didn't put it in the notes. Let me give you the link to this. This time, for once, I'm not fooled by a bullshit article.
If it's the Independent, yeah, that's a real story.
Yeah, it's the independent.co.uk. Pope Francis said he was in a homily that was dedicated to the concepts of acceptance and inclusion. He recalled a Bible story about the conversion of the first pagans to Christianity, and he said that Catholicism is a church of open doors, and it was up to Christians to accept the Holy Spirit, however unthinkable and unimaginable it appeared. So,
I think the Vatican scientist, I don't remember his name, but I think he said this before, that they would probably baptize aliens if somewhere found.
So I'm putting on my
Yeah, but I
conspiracy.
think that was the old Pope.
Oh, you're probably right. Yeah, that was. What was? I have already forgotten the Pope's name. I care that little.
Senator Palpatine.
Senator Palpatine.
Ratzinger.
Joey Rats. That's right.
Joey Rats.
I'm going to put on my conspiracy theorist hat here for a second and say, the Pope is saying that they'll baptize aliens. Why would he say that unless there's aliens? I don't actually remember what he sounds like. I don't listen to him enough. The Pope is saying that they're going to baptize aliens. They wouldn't say that if there weren't aliens, would they? There's got to be aliens.
Yeah, do that. That sounded good. Now just add a little wheeze at the end of it, and you're perfect.
There are a lot of people who actually believe that the Vatican is hiding evidence of there being intelligent alien life out there. It's kind of interesting to hear all the conspiracies surrounding that.
They really think that thing has more power than they have. Vatican.
Well, yeah, they're like, the Vatican has their own telescopes and this, that, and the other thing. It's like, yeah, they also have a lot of money and a lot of people that just sit there and twiddle their thumbs. I don't know. It's just stupid.
I love the idea that somebody somewhere with a telescope can find something that nobody else on the planet possibly can find.
I thought the Vatican was just hiding the fact of the divine feminine in...
yes, the Dan Brown novels are actually history. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea what you're talking about. I've not read any of them.
And actually, the claim was made in Holy Blood, Holy Grail, or something before the Dan Brown novels.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Graham Hancock. I've been studying him right now. That's an interesting character.
Ugh, yes.
Yes.
Graham Hancock. I'm going to look this up. Later, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, we know that the real aliens already landed millions of years ago when the stars were right.
Right. So, John, when you said that Pope Francis said this in a homily earlier, I thought you said a hominy, and I was wondering why he was sitting in a bowl of coarsely ground corn and grits.
He was having some grits and talking about aliens,
That would be kind of a hilarious thing to see somebody make a Photoshop of, is the Pope sitting in a giant bowl of grits. That'd be perfect cover art for this episode, I think.
Well, Monty Python did, was it Priests and Custard? So I think that's
Custard.
What was it? The one? It was the Loon of the Year award.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What was it? The Copes and the Priests and Custard. I think there was one where they're looking up the kilt of a Scotsman. I'm trying to remember some of the others, but or a guy being suspended horizontal under a can of tuna. Important stuff like that.
The Ideal Loon Exhibition.
Okay, there we go.
I love that show.
All right, well, I guess that's going to do it for this episode of Irreverent Skeptics. So, Stuart, thanks again for joining us. Give us a little plug for your podcast another time.
Okay. Come listen.
Listen to the
Do it, damn it.
Astronomy
Yeah.
Podcast with Stuart Robbins.
Podcast.sjrdesign.net. I look at, I do some conspiracy stuff, but mostly astronomy-based claims, Planet X, young Earth creationism, that kind of stuff.
Probably
Is
a lot
Planet
less.
X the same thing as Planet Nibiru?
It depends on whose version of Planet X you're listening to.
Probably a lot less Satanism, sexual abuse, and bad dick jokes on your show.
Have you ever gotten
Yes.
into how the aliens are actually the Nephilim?
Yeah.
No, I haven't addressed that.
I believe that episode's coming up pretty soon, I believe.
We forced his hand.
All right, so that's going to be it. So join us. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Forgot to throw to Mike and Dumbass. So, Mike Bowler, what do you have coming up next? I know. What do you have coming up next on the Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy?
Okay, I'm trying to get my TWA 100 show out. A few technical difficulties. A little bit behind again. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next, so maybe I like to do electrical pollution, the whole Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff. But I'm probably that needs a lot of visuals, so I might try to do a video or a video companion for that one.
Nice.
But that's what I'm thinking about right now.
Nice.
Oh, I guess I
Dumbass,
should mention.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I guess I should mention I'm working on my first formal video for my podcast.
Excellent.
I actually have a trailer up at YouTube right now, so y'all should check that out. It's called the Cydonia region of Mars, looking into claims made starting probably the 1970s through 1980s and all the way through today that the Cydonia area of Mars, which is where the face on Mars is intelligently designed, basically, by aliens.
The Pareidolia on Mars.
What was that guy's name?
And numerology.
There's some pseudo-astronomer that I remember reading about. He was
Hoagland?
big into that. Hoagland, yes. Yeah.
Hoagland!
Hoagland! Yeah.
Yes.
All right, Dumbass, what's coming up on Amateur Skeptics?
Oh, well, the latest episode of Amateur Skeptics, I wasn't there for that, so it's hardly worth listening to. But
They screwed up the Boy Scouts. I
Who
forget what
screwed the Boy Scouts?
oh yeah. Oh no, yeah. They made a mistake on that. I was following the messages on that, and they oh crap, we made a mistake in the emails. But yeah, they said something about Baden Powell. They mistook him for Colin Powell, I think.
Right.
I was going to say the old song.
I wasn't there to correct them, which that's the only reason they.
Yeah, that's just what I figured. It's that the show went to shit when you left. So
Yes.
I've got some Baden Powell music here.
Okay.
Excellent.
You can skip this last episode. Just wait till the next one when I'm on it again.
I don't even think that last one exists, as far as I'm concerned.
What's a
There you go.
podcast again?
Whatever that's about. All right, well that's gonna do it for real this time. So we're out of here. We will see you all again next week.
And remember, for just $50, you can join your local satanic cult.